Oliver Jeffers, and I'm going to be today having a chat with Nicole Stott. Now, Nicole is an American astronaut, aquanaut, artist, mother, and activist around science, creativity, and sustainability. And her first book, entitled Back to Earth: What Life in Space Taught Me About Our Home Planet and Our Mission to Protect. So Nicole is a veteran NASA astronaut with 2 space flights and 104 days as a crew member on both the International Space Station and the Space Shuttle. So I think you can confirm or deny these, that some personal highlights of your time in space include performing a spacewalk, the 10th woman in history to do so. That's true.
That is true, yes.
Okay. Flying the robotic
So far,
arm.
everything's been true, yeah.
Okay. So Nicole, you've used this analogy before that rather than being passengers on this spaceship, that we should all attempt to be crewmates. And I love the idea of that. Can you tell us a little more about it, please?
Yeah, I think one thing that became really clear to me as I was living on this mechanical spaceship, the International Space Station in space, and is that we go there deliberately as crew, right? We go there and we know just to survive, we have to pay attention to all the things like how much CO2 is in our atmosphere, how much clean drinking water we have, integrity of our thin metal hull, and the health and well-being of all of our crewmates. And very quickly while I was there, I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what we need to be doing as Earthlings, as crewmates, not passengers on Spaceship Earth. So I felt like it was really important that I share that message when I come home. It's like, man, there is a big difference between being a passenger and being a crewmate, whether you're in space on a space station or you're down here on our planetary spaceship.
So you're an astronaut and you're an aquanaut as well.
Yeah, so really fortunate. I mean, had the opportunity to fly in space, to have this outer space experience. I think that, beyond just the science, experiencing Earth from that perspective, kind of wrapping around the planet. And then also as an aquanaut, living underwater for an extended period of time on this place called the Aquarius Undersea Habitat.
So are there a lot of similarities then? I mean, obviously they're the total opposite of each other in some ways, but are there similarities between being that deep underwater?
So there's nothing better, I don't think, than going underwater and living in that kind of place with the ocean surrounding you, as there is to going into space. When we scuba dive, right? We go down, to a depth, and you can only be there for a certain amount of time before you have to come up safely because of the nitrogen that gets into our bodies. Mm-hmm. You can't just swim to the surface safely. You have to figure out how to deal with any problem you have at 60 feet underwater. Same thing. You can't just swim to the surface to escape. In space, you can't just hop in your spaceship anytime to come home.
When you're in space, it's like, being in Texas on a very clear night, you can just see stars everywhere. Is that what it's like when you're out of the Earth's atmosphere? Are there stars everywhere, or does it just appear totally black?
There are absolutely stars everywhere. One of the really cool things about lifting above the bulk of the atmosphere and then either looking back at Earth or out into space is that everything just looks so crystal clear. Like you look back at Earth and it's just glowing, like crystal clear, iridescent, translucent, all those colors that Earth to be, just like glowing all the time, whether it's night or day. And then out into space, it's like the blackest black I'd ever seen, the clearest, brightest black I'd ever seen. And then if you got it really dark inside of the spaceship or inside of the space station and let your eyes adjust, all those stars come out like you think they would. These billions and billions of stars, just like it seems like it goes on forever, which I guess maybe it kind of does. But like there's depth to it and clarity. And then, the planets that we know of, like that we see even here from Earth, Mars and Jupiter and all the ones in our solar system and the moon, that we can look at from here on Earth, just seem to be clearer as well. And it's incredible.
And I think so much of this comes back to art and to narrative. And that's why it's so fascinating that you have both minds and you see patterns, you make art. And it's the two things just there seems to be a disconnect, but really there's not at all.
I think the art is what it allows us to make a connection, right? And I just have to tell you, the whole astronaut artist thing,
Mm.
from the earliest person in space, there's been art coming back, purposely created in space and then after space flight to communicate that experience.
What's it like to paint watercolor in space? Because
It was really, really fun. I mean, of course, everything floats.
yeah, because gravity's plays a big part in watercolor painting.
It does. It does. I have one picture of painting in space, and I'm so thankful to my crewmate, Bob Thirst, for taking that picture just coincidentally. And I wish I would have videotaped the whole thing, because I think it would have been such a cool way to show just what the physics of being in space is for the person, for the stuff that you have there. But everything floats, and so you absolutely have to be organized. Which sometimes, if you look at my desk, or I think that, although look at your paints, they're so organized behind you. God bless you.
I've literally just cleaned up after it's not always like this.
But you really have to kind of think about those things in advance. Where's my paint kit going to be? My brush? How am I going to hold it? Velcro? What am I using? And then, of course, you're not dipping your brush into a cup of water, because there's no cups of water. So I'm squirting little balls of water out to dip the brush into, and they're floating. And I'm looking at it like, wow, this is really cool. And then taking the tip of the brush over to it. And it was like the water wanted to move onto the end of the brush before I even touched it. And I mean, I just remember being just in awe of that, like watching this ball of water float around on the end of the brush, and then how it moved towards the paints and the colored water coming back on the brush. And then on your paper, you had to kind of totally reconsider the way you used the brush and painted. Because if you touched the brush to the paper, the whole blob of colored water just went immediately, just at once transferred in. So it kind of got to the point where I had to find that perfect distance between the paper and the ball of water, and just use the brush to drag the colored water along the paper. It was so cool.
You're saying that you're looking out the window and painting those islands, just to bring it back to that sort of that perspective of seeing the Earth from afar, taking something familiar and shifting it ever so slightly, so you get a completely different perspective, can change entirely how you feel about that. What kind of things do you think people can do, other than trying to tell stories and help translate to other people? What sort of day-to-day things do you think people can do that might make a difference?
I would love it if everybody would every day just consciously consider this idea of living on a planet, and that you're an earthling, and this idea of the thin blue line. And that's, to me, the way I do that is I go outside and I stand in the grass, and I just stand there for a minute, and then I look up at this blue that seems to go on forever. And I remind myself that it's just this thin blue veil, that even though I'm standing there like still on Earth, where I feel like I'm still, that I am spinning at 1,000 miles an hour on this planet. And then I just look around me at all of the things that baffle me, and really try to consider that in a way that helps me accept this crew member role, and that it's not just about me in my backyard. I need to think of how all of what I do every day affects my family, my community, and then all earthlings and life we share the planet with at large. And all of it is connected. I mean, that's what that perspective from space gives you too. It's like, wow, spin the Earth around. There's that only board. It's everything. Everyone is interconnected in one way or another, and it becomes beautifully crystal clear that the only border that matters is that thin blue line of atmosphere that blankets and protects us all.
Now, Nicole, I have one more question for you. Actually, two more. Will you go back into outer space?
I hope so. That's my plan. I retired as a NASA astronaut, but I'm always hopeful. I mean, ask me when I'm 95, do I want to go back to space? The answer is absolutely yes. So,
second question, can I come with you?
Yes, you absolutely can. And I will say the same thing to you, Oliver. Get the chance, please call me.
Okay.
Happy to be your guide. Well, of course, we've got a challenge that brings art and space together. And what we'd like people to do is design a postcard with artwork that represents our mission as crewmates here on Spaceship Earth and how that mission includes our job to protect our planetary home. And you can include something you're doing to help Earth and the life that we share it with, or something that someone else is doing or has done that inspires you. And what would be really cool is if you could include somewhere in that artwork on your postcard 3 words within your artwork that represent why you are thankful to Earth as well. Yep, that's it.
All
That's
right.
it.
Okay. So it can be intimidating just looking at a blank piece of paper and the idea of making something from nothing. So do you have any tips for how people might go about thinking about this or making something?
I would take the time to really consider this idea that we all live on a planet in space. I mean, that we really are crewmates, that we are astronauts, if you will, on our planetary spaceship. And that within your art, you can incorporate things that make you think about Earth as a spaceship. So I think that's 2 things. And then number 3, I would say is really, even if you haven't flown to space yet, you can consider this perspective of Earth from space. And it's why I love the name of the whole project here, Our Place in Space, is because that's the perspective we want you to bring through in the artwork.
I suppose I have some practical tips for people as well, just for starting out. You don't have to do everything perfectly the first time. Nothing ever turns out the way that you think it will, and you just react to what happens as you go. But also, it's okay to sketch out very roughly what you think is going to happen and see how the idea works very vaguely before you start trying to do any kind of detail in there. And the most important thing of all about making art is having fun. Brilliant. Thanks for being with us today, Nicole.
Thank you.